Alright, in this video I'm going to show you a few pointers on creating this hex tunnel. We're going to focus on creating regular polygons. Those are polygons where all of the sides are equal. We're going to be using some instancers for that. And then I'm also going to talk about these animating balls that you see sliding through as well. Those are radial instancers with some object behaviors applied, animations, as well as some rotation on the Z. Now you can pick up this file from www.bcraftmath.com/mo2 and feel free to go ahead and open it up and start exploring. And inside of the inspector for mo2, underneath the generator, you're going to see a lot of things inside of here, and I'm going to break each piece down. We're not going to create this entire tunnel because that would take a while to go over every individual piece, but I do want to give you some pointers on getting those lights to move real fast. You saw those animating at the beginning. They would start animating here and go all the way to the end, and we would have some loops. I also want to show you how to create these polygons here. This is a hexagon, but we can actually use a little bit of geometry to create equilateral triangles, regular pentagons, regular hexagons, regular octagons, just a little bit of geometry there with that. Now I do have the active camera set to this wrench versus the diamond. That way it will run a little bit faster. You know, with this setting, it's on the bloom and all that. So just setting that there so it'll run faster. And also, if you want to export as a 4K, just go change your project properties underneath the edit menu. And if I go back to the beginning here, I just want to go over first how to create the shapes. Now you see these balls or these lights kind of animating through as well. I'll cover that in a moment. But let's talk about this hexagon. How do we get these hexagons to work? Well, I think the best way to show you is just to start from scratch. And what I'm going to do in mo2, I already have it loaded up. I'm going to go ahead and add a sphere underneath the model primitives. And I'll leave it as its default settings. No need to change the size here. We can just zoom out as we need to when we start creating more of these. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and add an instancer. It's going to be a linear. And let's put the sphere inside of the instancer. I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to reset it. I'm going to drag out on my Z so that I can see that ball. Now, we had multiple spheres here, but that's because those spheres are going in the Z direction. If I go to perspective, you can see them going back like that. I'm going to switch back to active, and we're going to move the balls to the right. To do that, I'm going to go to my instancer, I'm going to scroll down, and position Z, I'm going to set that equal to 0. And for the position X, I'm going to set that to 5. Now we can see the balls going to the right. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my default camera, I'm going to zoom out some more, and I want to have more than 5. I think I ended up putting 30 on each side. But for the sake of this video, I'll do 10. So inside of the instancer, let's set the count to 10. Now our balls are mashed together. We need to scroll on down to position X. If we set this to 10, let's see what happens. That gives us 10 balls lined up, and we have a little gap in between each one. That works nice. Now, depending on what shape you want to create, there is a little bit of geometry that we're going to do here. And I'm going to create the pentagon. I have the hexagon already in that file, in my shared files. So let's create a pentagon here, a regular pentagon. So we want 5 sides, all of them the same length. And there's this formula in geometry. You take the number of sides you have, subtract 2 from that, and then multiply it by 180. If we want a pentagon, let's take 5 sides, subtract 2, that's going to be 3, and then multiply that by 180. 540 degrees is going to be the sum of all 5 of these angles in the pentagon, the sum of all 5. So if we come and divide this by 5, we get 108. That's going to be the measure of each one of these angles inside of this regular pentagon. Now I had this horizontal line here. If we add up all 3 of these angles on this horizontal line, we will get 180 degrees. So since we already know this one's 108, let's take 180, subtract 108, and we get 72. Now we want to take 72 degrees and cut it in half to get 36 degrees on each side. This is important when we go to rotate our instancer, and that's what I want to do right now. Let's keep this 36 degrees in mind. So back to this instancer that we have here, if we take the rotation Z and watch what happens if I start increasing it or if I start decreasing it. And I'm going to fold it down this way. And remember that angle we had, negative 36? I'm going to use negative since I'm going in that direction, but negative 36 degrees is going to give me the angle that I need for that first side. I'm going to zoom out a good distance on my camera. I'm going to take this instancer and I'm just going to move it up on the Y, just so we can have some more room. So with that moved up, let's take this instancer and let's duplicate it. Now you probably want to add some materials in here, so go ahead and do that, or we'll come back at the end and I'll show you some quick tweaks that we can apply to this. So we had this new instancer right here. Now the rotation center is where you see this 3D gizmo. I want to create a side down here for my Pentagon. So if I want to rotate this one down this way, I want to create my rotation center to be right here. Well, check out what we can do. Let's go to the anchor point for this new instancer that we just duplicated. Let's set the alignment to right. That shifts it over here to this side. Now if I switch to perspective and I frame in the items, this rotation center is not actually in the middle of this sphere. It's on the right edge of this sphere. So what we need to do is we need to move this back in just a little bit. And as a matter of fact, we want to move it in the radius of the sphere. So these spheres that we created, I didn't change anything about their dimensions. The radius is 0.5. So with my instancer selected, making sure I had this anchor point down here, I'm going to zoom in on that. And again, check out that anchor point. We want to put it right here. So here's what we can do with this position X of that anchor point. I want to take it, instead of it being 10.5, I just want to do 10. Now watch what happens when I press enter. Now this anchor point is right in the center of that sphere. That's perfect. Let's go back to the active camera. And now with this instancer selected, the one we duplicated, if we start rotating it, let's see which way we need to go. This is the way that we want to go. And let's bear in mind where we were. We were at negative 36 degrees. So I want to rotate this one in this direction. And when we're done rotating this, we want the angle between these two pieces to be 108 degrees. Bear in mind, that's the interior angles. All 5 of these interior angles have a measure of 108 degrees. So we want this angle right here that we're creating to be 108 degrees. And again, one more time, remember we were at negative 36, right? So let's take negative 36, and since we were going in the positive direction, let's add 108 to it. So we want to set this angle to 72. So if I type in a 72, there's my second side. Now let's continue this pattern. Let's duplicate the instancer again. And now with that instancer selected, what we need to do is we need to come to its anchor point. Let's go to set left and watch what happens when I set left. It jumped from here down to here. If I switch to perspective, slide on down, and I frame in that new anchor point that we have. Notice that anchor point is on the edge. Again, I want to put it on the inside of that sphere, right smack in the middle. So with that alignment, if I set this position X to 0, watch what happens. Now we are dead in the center. Switching back over to active. What do we want to do now? We are at 72. Well, if I start increasing this some more, it's going to open up that third side. So we were at 72, and then we want to open it up another 108 degrees. So this one needs to be set to 180. So taking that rotation Z, set it to 180, bam. Duplicating, setting the anchor point now to right, it shifts it over. Taking the position X and getting this anchor point right smack in the middle of that sphere, I'm going to set that equal to 10. If you did notice, it did slide just a little bit to the right. Let's take the rotation, and if we continue to increase this from 180, and then we're going to go 180 plus another 108 degrees. Let's set this one equal to 288. And let's do this one more time, and we're going to close in our regular pentagon. So duplicate. This one needs to be set to the right. Basically, you just want to make sure you're shifting that anchor point to this corner instead of that corner. Let's back off on that position X, setting it equal to 0. That is going to center that anchor point on that sphere. And then you guessed it. Let's take the 288 that we're at right now, and let's rotate it another 108 degrees. We are at 396. And there's your pentagon. That is how I created all of these spheres that you see, these little spheres in here, as well as these lines. I just used tubes instead of spheres. And now let me show you how to get the variation in this shape. Just going to go to this last instancer that we have here, and I'm going to add a null. Take that null and we'll drag it into the instancer. And now we have an alternating pattern here. So I'm going to create another null, and I'm going to drag it into this instancer here. So we see the alternating pattern, but maybe you want it to be a random pattern. So if we come to any of these instancers with the null inside of it, if you scroll down to the instancer settings and set this to random, now you'll get a random order of these dots or these spheres. So if you look back at this hex tunnel, you will see that these dots, there's a lot more of them. I think there's 30 of them per side, but I have them set to random. So it's not alternating, it's just a totally random effect. So yeah, that's how I create those regular polygons. Feel free to take a snapshot of this. If you want to create an equilateral triangle, you would start off with this -60, because we did a -36 over here. I did the hexagon in the project files that I'm sharing, but you could do any number of sides that you want. So I'm going to take all of these instancers that we just created and I'm going to group them together, holding shift and selecting the first and the last one. I'm going to right click and group. And for this group here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset its parameters, make sure everything is set to 0. Even down here, I'm going to take all of these positions and set them equal to 0. And I'm just going to get everything centered up in my scene. Now, if you notice the anchor point of this group that I have all these instancers in, if we want to get this in the middle and we have everything set to 0, I'm going to come to this anchor point and I'm going to click Set Center. And with this set properly, if we come back to the position of the X, and in this case the Y, that pretty much gets our regular pentagon right in the middle of our scene. Now what I want to show you is how did I get those balls to animate down the tunnel. Let's go ahead and add another sphere. And now let's add an instancer, but for this one, let's do a radial. Let's drop the sphere inside of the instancer. And by default, I got lucky here, but this instancer will do a count of 5. You can increase this count to have more or less, but I'm going to stick with 5 since I had 5 sides to my shape. The radius of this radial instancer will extend these pieces out. And if I extend them out just enough, they will match up perfectly with the pentagon that I created earlier. Maybe somewhere around 8. Let's try 10. Let's see what 10 looks like. 10's a little bit too big, but you can fine tune that to your liking. Maybe 8.5. If I drag down, that looks like it's lining up pretty good. And the thing is, these are going to be animating so fast, you're not even going to notice how they line up, so that's no big deal there. I'm going to go ahead and add a material to this sphere. That is lining up pretty good because you can almost see kind of how like the yellow and the white are bleeding together. Just going to scroll down to this material that I have. I'm going to bump its illuminance up. Change the color so we can see the difference. And here's what we want to do with this. We want to loop it. So with that instancer selected, I'm going to come down to its animation. I'm going to do an object behavior. If I go to animation out and I set the position for the Z, let's do a linear move Z out. And if I scrub the playhead, it's going to move the balls towards the camera, but I want them to move away from the camera, kind of like down into the tunnel. Well, quick fix there, instead of this position multiplier being positive, let's make it negative. And now if I scrub the playhead, you are seeing that the balls are moving away from the camera as time goes on. Now if we make this position multiplier even more negative, such as -10, it's going to move even farther away. I'm going to set it to -20. And something else I'm also going to do here, as this thing moves away, I'm going to make it have more than one loop. And I'm also going to alter the end time. So I'm just going to scroll to the end of my project, 300 frames, and I'm going to click End at Current Frame. So basically right now, it's going to start here and it's going to animate to that position multiplier of -20. So as you can see, it is going farther and farther and farther away. But I want it to do this more than one time. So let's say maybe we want it to do it 5 times. Now if I play this, it's going to be animating away and it's going to do this 5 times in that 300 frames. So you can see it that it is looping. Now something else we want to do with this instancer, I'm going to come up here to the rotation Z. Now we could put this inside of a null and we could animate the null with an object behavior. But what I want to do here is I just want to rotate these balls around the center as it goes down into the tunnel. And a way to do that is to keyframe the rotation Z. So I'm going to keyframe it at the beginning of my project at 0 degrees. And here at the end, let's say maybe we want it to do, I don't know, 5 rotations. So if I take 360 degrees and I multiply it by 5, we get 1800. So for this to do 5 full rotations by the end of our project, we need to set this to 1800 degrees. And whatever our interpolation is, linear would work good here, and it's already set to that. So I'm going to scrub back to the beginning and let's see what happens. Now you get that animation behavior. And that's pretty much what I had going on. Now I'm going to take this instancer here and I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to show you how we can get those different effects. So if I duplicate that, if I come down to its object behavior, sometimes I have found when I duplicate things, I lose some of these properties. So that's something worth noting. That position multiplier, we had it set to -20. The loop count, we had it set to 5. I want to set this one to 3, something random. It's still starting and ending at the beginning and end of our project. And then I want to come over here for the Z rotation. Instead of it going 1800 degrees, I'm going to make this one go, let's say -1080. It's going to rotate in the opposite direction. And 1080 degrees is 3 full rotations. So now that we have 2 of these up here, let's see what it looks like. And you're going to have one looping more than the other. So you can get entirely different effects based on how you set the number of loops, your rotation, how you have it sliding out. But taking all of those things into consideration, and then by diving into this project here that I have in my shared files, all of these instancer loops are the glowing balls that are rotating that you saw at the beginning of the video. And then down here in this group, the instancer hex and text, these are where I have my hexagons that I showed you how to create. And then I have some text items as well, where I have this SVG, OBJ, MO2, VFX, and all that stuff. And yeah, there you have it. A few pointers on creating some regular polygons in MO2, as well as just taking a radial instancer and applying an object behavior and some rotation to get that 3D effect of the balls flying down into the tunnel. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.